Welcome to Study with the Best, the magazine show that's all about CUNY. I'm Tina Beth Pena. Today's show recognizes Black History Month, and we'll see artwork linked to the African diaspora, learn about the Black Music History Archive right here at York College, and so much more. But first, York College teacher Nina Buxenbaum interprets double identity in her paintings, which in more ways than one mirrors her own racial makeup, African American and Jewish. When I look at the ways in which Black people are depicted generally in Western media, I don't recognize the people. They're stereotypes, they're flat images, they're not people that we can really identify in that personal, human-connected kind of way. My name is Nina Buxenbaum. Currently, I'm an associate professor at York College. I teach drawing and painting. I really just see myself as pieces that make a whole, and then, I paint that. The Topsy-Turvy doll is an image that I started using back in 2001. I started exploring that idea of this double-sided figure where you have one figure on one side veiled by this long billowy dress, and then when you turn that over, there's a completely different figure underneath. When I was thinking about the images that are really personal to me, that was the image that came to mind. My mother is from New Orleans, Louisiana. She is a mixture of African, French, Scottish, and Native American. My father is German, Jewish, American. My parents divorced when I was 6, and so I was raised primarily by my mother. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. I am the youngest of 3 siblings. On the one hand, that was helpful to have other biracial family members because I didn't know a lot of people who had the same mixture that I had. Both of my parents were very politically active, very socially progressive, and so we had lots of conversations about what my racial identity was and then how the world was going to see me, which would not always be the same. I identified the way that my mother identified, and I look like my mother. She identifies as a Black woman. I was going to identify as a Black woman. Well, I'm a figurative representational painter, and for me, it's always been really important to place the Black figure within that Western traditional style. I missed seeing Black women and brown people depicted in these images in ways that were not necessarily as the servants. You didn't see them ever as central figures within a painting, and you certainly didn't see them as icons of beauty. When I make images of people of color from a personal space, it becomes political because it's an image of a Black body. As much as we want to see the world as black and white, it just isn't, right? It's shades of gray, there is ambiguity, there is nuance to us as individuals and to us as members of society. I think when I use myself in my imagery, it's often a way to speak very directly to how I am experiencing my own racial identity or my own identity as a woman. I have 2 children. My daughter is 8 and my son is 6. I've done several paintings of my daughter because, one, she loves to ham it up, right? She just, paint me, mommy, paint me, mommy. But she has this, amazing, beautiful hair. And I think she's sort of emblematic of this mixture, like how we are becoming increasingly biracial. So I'm starting to talk to my children about the history because I want them to understand that there is no one specific way to look. It's about a shared history. It's about a shared culture. And I want them to be proud of that. Teaching on the college level allows me to continue to be inspired by the community I work in, because I find my students are incredibly thoughtful, inspiring people. The artist needs to be able to explain, needs to be able to have that conversation, because it's always hard work. And so that's what I try to encourage in my classroom, is this engagement with the image, questioning of the image. Don't just look at what is the surface, but really try to find the deeper meaning for yourself. I actually think there's more space for my work outside of New York. Currently, I live in Bethel, Connecticut. Out here, I think that people kind of appreciate the figurative nature of my work, but also the social political commentary. The way that I work, I start, with an underpainting, and then I work in layers on top. When you add texture, it has a different experience than a drawing. It's about capturing the essence of something. And I think that that's something that paint can do in a way that's really beautiful and inspiring and engaging. The idea of the double-sided person, as I've gotten older, it's really about coming to terms with this is how I look, this is how people view me, but then there's how I identify myself on the inside. And so those things are often in conflict. Through conflict, we come to catharsis, we come to understanding. That a lot of times I'll have the figures kind of exploring each other's hair as a way of creating a sense of intimacy. Because I think it's important for people to have to think about these things and not just have an initial reaction or be told what they should feel from a painting, but have to sit and kind of contemplate and think about it. Are they struggling or are they hugging? Is she pulling her hair or is she playing with her hair? Like, what is happening in this image? And I think in that way, the figures start to address each other as human beings. My mom keeps asking me, well, how long are you going to be doing these topsy-turvies? I think that because it offers so many different stories that it can tell just with this idea of the double figure, especially in this time right now, it's really relevant because we are so divided. You have to find the thing that you really enjoy saying, and you keep telling it until you're done. And I think that's the power of painting and visual imagery. It just creates a space where we can see ourselves reflected in these images, because everything is beautiful in paint.
You can see more stories like this on our new web-based anthology show, CUNY TV's digital series. Through his Pulitzer Prize-winning work, College of Staten Island professor Tyehimba Jess reveals how sometimes African Americans identify themselves, or choose not to, through the prism of historical African American artists.
Olio is a book about the lives of 19th century African American creatives who were the very first folks after emancipation to experience the freedom of pursuing their art forms. Cissy Retta Jones, I should say, was the very first African American to sing at Carnegie Hall in 1892, really before it was even called Carnegie Hall. So she says, "What kind of mask might I have on?" she said. "Because let me tell you, most don't even know they're wearing a mask. You got to know which masks, how many masks you're wearing before you can put it down and see your true self. Those that do, they know just how to slide in and out of it, how to make the world spin inside it and out of it, how to spread their song all over that mask and make it one with the world, no matter how thick or thin the truth in that song might be." And I think what that is about self-awareness and awareness of the kind of masks that one might have to put on, that black folks will have to put on in order to navigate the terrain just of everyday life, and also the ability to understand where the mask ends and where your true self begins. And that is that you know, that you're talking about a lot of subconscious self-hate, a lot of learned and a lot of prejudice against one's own self and one's own people that one has to navigate because of the way that we are taught, the way white supremacy is taught and enforced in every aspect of our society. This is a poem about Blind Boone, in the voice of Blind Boone, who was at one point auditioned for a job to cut a piano roll. So this is Blind Boone's Pianola Blues. They said I wasn't smooth enough to beat their sharp machine, that my style was obsolete, that old rags had lost their gleam and lunge, that all I had left was a sucker punch that couldn't touch the invisible piano man with his wind-up, gutless guts of paper rolls. And so I went and told them that before the night was through, I'd prove what the son of an ex-slave could do. I dared them to put on their most twisted tune, to play it double time while I listened from another room past the traffic sounds of the avenue below, to play it only once, then to let me show note for note how that scroll made its roll through Chopin or Bach or Beethoven's best. And if I failed to match my fingers and ears with the spinning gears of their invisible pneumatic piano scholar, I'd pay them the price of $1,000. And what was in it for Boone, you might ask? Might be the same thing that drives men through mountains at heart attack pace. Might be just to prove some task ain't meant to be neatly played out on paper and into air, but rather should tear out from lung, heart, and brain with a flare of flicked wrists and sly smile above the 88s. And of course, that ever-human weight of pride that swallows us when a thing's done just right. But they were eager to prove me wrong. They chose their fastest machine with their trickiest song and stuck it in a room far down the hall from me. They didn't know how sharp I can see with these ears of mine. I caught every note, even though they played it in triple time. And when I played it back to them, even faster, I could feel the violent stares, heard one mutter, "Lucky black bastard." And that was my cue to rise, to take a bow in the smoldering silence and say, not luck, my friend, but the science of touch and sweat and stubborn old toil. I bet these 10 fingers against any coil of wire and parchment and pump. And I left them there to ponder the wonders of blindness as I walked out the door into the heat of the sun.
Brooklyn College grad Michael Kelly Williams' artwork is often linked with the African diaspora. Let's take a look.
I'm trying to make really the best art that I can possibly make. That's something that I've been taught by my mentors, and trying to emulate my favorite musicians, you know, to just reach for it.
Battery 90%.
I came to New York in 1979 to work with my mentor, Bob Blackburn. I showed him my portfolio, and I began to work. I came with no money, but Bob had a tradition of, you know, you could become a monitor and look after the shop. That still happens here. And so you become a monitor, you answer the phone, you open the door, you know, you answer telephones, and you clean up, and you're able to work in the shop. So as you see, it's just one large room, and wherever you are, you could just listen and hear a master teacher. This is a drawing that I'm preparing for a woodcut about the Algiers Motel incident that happened 50 years ago. I was 17 at that time in Detroit when this happened. I wanted to make my statement about this particular incident. So I'm preparing the drawing, which will be flipped upside down, put it on the block, and then I'll cut it out using woodcut tools. And so that will leave the surface that'll be rolled and printed from. I work in an intuitive way. I might find something on the street that intrigues me. You know, I mean, you can find so much thrown away in New York. For instance, this test tube cradle here, for me, it's very musical. You know, you've got all these openings here. It's like an instrument in itself, like a reed instrument. At this point in my life, my influences have pretty much percolated. The history of sculpture is within me, but I find a great affinity to the folk tradition. You know, I'm just completely amazed at artists, for example. You'll find, you know, artists in the South who work on things in their gardens. They create, you know, things out of found objects, just really wonderful. You know, they didn't go to art school, but you know, really profound works of art.
This next story took place more than 50 years ago when a City College student joined and then documented on film the history-making Selma-to-Montgomery March. You may not know Clarence Irving, but his donations right here at York College helped create the Black Music History Archive, which houses everything and anything related to legendary African-American musicians from Queens.
There were lots of musicians and jazz artists that came right out of Southeast Queens.
This was a community that was created by them, mostly because it was necessary. Segregation was very much in place in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s when they were here, and they sort of found each other and created a community. Clarence Irving was a part of that as a promoter, as a writer, and just as an all-around good man. We are fortunate enough that York gave us an empty storage space in what used to be the periodicals area of the library here at York. And in it are just bins and bins and bins that were brought from Clarence Irving's home in Long Island, but it needs manpower. So what I've been asked to do is to assess what we have, to give them an estimate of how much money it would cost in materials, that would be archival boxes and sheets, mylar, etc., to protect these objects, the photographs, the correspondence. It's going to require funding that I know doesn't exist right now for this purpose. We would have to create grants, we would have to apply for grants, etc., in hopes of getting enough to process. And then I believe we will find space. This is a box of stamps that Buck Clayton put together. He's a composer and a musician, lived on Glassboro Avenue in Jamaica, New York, right here. And what he has had created on these stamps are his own kind of language. I mean, he refers to these objects as words and music. So things like vamp till ready, directions for the composition and how it should be played. So some basic things like, okay, this is for clarinet, this is for trombone, there's a solo chorus, there's ensemble, but then he actually has a stamp that says as is. And then we have his Tiger Bomb, which means that he probably did a lot of work with his music and always had his Tiger Bomb in hand. I think that this is one of the most charming and still not yet 100% known or understood elements in the collection. This is the kind of stuff that a researcher would want to come and see. Just to experience the fact that all of these stamps were made by this musician and must have been used and knew where they were, you know, to create a specific song to be made in a specific way.
York College, we're right in the middle of Southeast Queens, predominantly black neighborhood. And I feel that this community has a lot of accomplishments and a lot of accomplished people. And they should be recognized in some sense so that they're not looking down on our community because it's not as bad as may have been propaganded as being. Having the archives here and then dealing with legacy of people, let's see what you did. What did you do? What did your grandmother accomplish? Let's talk about it. Be willing to come to us and say, it would be nice if you could archive this person or this person. They did this for the church, and the church did this for the community.
As a black woman working in a school where we are, I would say, 92% brown-skinned people from all over the world, this archive should be something that a student writing a research paper, an undergraduate for a class, would be able to put their hands on original letters that were signed by these important people. That is a gift, a true gift. And that's what makes it important that this happens. So I'm going to sit on it. I'm not going to let it rest. And I think the squeaky wheel will get the oil in this instance.
That's our show for today. For more information on any of our stories, log on to our website at CUNY.TV or check out our Study with the Best Facebook page. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.